Welcome to the Coach Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Keren. Settle in. We're about to make you feel really good. If you've ever wanted to build a masterful empire, I think you're going to want to pay attention to this. Welcome back to the Coach Podcast. I am your host, Coach Keren, and we're back with another episode in the Coaching Masters series. You're going to want to really tune in for today's very special guest, Miss Kelly Brogan. If this is your first time here, welcome. We talk about all things mindset, but we also talk about all things teaching, the business of coaching and the masterful coaching business. In other words, how to do it right and why you should do it right. If you're into any of these, hit subscribe or just settle in. I promise you're going to have a really good time. My guest today, as I mentioned, is Kelly Brogan, MD, a holistic psychiatrist, a New York Times bestselling author, the creator of Reclamation Radio, and the founder of a platform devoted to what she calls Embodied Reclamation and whole life empowerment. We are going to explore how she built her stellar success, the frameworks, the containers, the team, the product ladder, and all the choices that she's made behind and before the brand. And hopefully we'll have a candid conversation that's not only tactical, but vulnerable, so that any of you out there who is building your own flagship, your own mothership, if you will, that was a Joe Rogan throw, will have the same advantages that she's accumulated over time. Kelly, I'm so happy that you're here.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming, doctor.
Thank you.
I have a soft spot for all kinds of psychiatrists because I'm a giant Frasier fan.
Oh, well, that's not a popular sentiment to have a soft spot for psychiatrists. But
you know, he makes that joke on the show many, many times.
That's so funny. It's
I
true.
just love it. Well, you began on a very traditional track.
Yeah.
MIT, Cornell, NYU, MD. And then you built a non-traditional mission-centered brand. This is a true pivot, a big shift. Can you tell us the story of how you've come here?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of myself, if I have mastery in any realm, it's probably in the pivot because I've done it so many times at that point. It was probably my, inception. And I was, well, first of all, it's important to back up contextually because I'm a second generation American. My mom is Italian, and anybody who has immigrant parents knows that there's a good amount of pressure typically to almost make it worth their leaving, the heritage of the motherland, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was really encouraged to become a successful, businesswoman, doctor, lawyer, and to establish myself. My mom, I don't think would have identified herself as a feminist. She was a stay-at-home mom and relished that role. However, there was a lot of ideology that seeped its way in where I was encouraged to be as financially independent, as self-sufficient, and to prove that I could do what any guy could do even better, right? So with that mindset, I complied with all of the expectations, around my schooling and 4.0s and went to MIT, which is just like such a funny, weird choice for me because I had no aspirations to become an engineer, but it was like the best launching pad for me in whatever career I might choose. And I worked a suicide hotline at MIT. I volunteered, and I'm not even sure why, other than that the hand of, fate was pushing me in that direction. And because of that, I came to believe that we've cracked the code of human behavior, and all you have to do is connect people who are struggling with psychiatrists who can medicate them. That's the belief that I came out of that really holding with such a fierce grip that I said, this is what I want to do with my life. So I went to medical school to become a psychiatrist and then specialized in medicating women, right? Because I had this feminist, energy in me. And I said, well, I'm going to help and serve women. And how am I going to do it? I'm going to make sure that they have access to the medications that they deserve and are entitled to. And as is not uncommon for medical doctors who, go rogue, it wasn't until I bumped up against the glass ceiling of what the system that I had pledged my allegiance to was offering me personally that I experienced this rupture. And it was when I was diagnosed with my first real medical problem. It was postpartum, my first pregnancy. At that point, I had specialized as a reproductive psychiatrist, which again means that I was one of the first 300 in the world to specialize in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women Haldol, Klonopin, Lexapro, lithium, you name it. So I was doing that every single day, writing these prescriptions. But I remember the day that I was pregnant, right? And I had this dissonant moment where I thought, I would never take one of these medications as a pregnant woman, writing a prescription for a pregnant woman. In psychology, that's called a rupture of empathy. It's a feeling like, what I have trusted to guide me is not trustworthy. Something is wrong here, right? So I had this rumble and ignored it mostly. And then when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which was a condition that many, many, many of my patients came to me already having been diagnosed, I had the same sense, like, I don't want to take a prescription. It's good enough for them, but I don't want to do it. And so because of that, I sought out the escape hatch, which was very uncharacteristic of me. I went to a naturopath and through dietary change alone. I mean, literally, that was it. But for an Italian American who's eating like bread and cheese every day, all day, eating McDonald's, eating like total candy addict, it was radical. Like, it was a radical disruption of my patterns. And I put my condition into remission. I could see it in black and white in my labs within the space of a year. And it just lit a fire in me. Like, instead of feeling excited and celebratory and wow, it's so wonderful, I felt enraged. And again, like, if you look through the lens of maturational psychology, this was the culmination of that rupture where I felt betrayed by the system that I had parentified. I felt like, wait a minute, I was never taught that nutrition mattered in med school. I was never taught that you could put an otherwise recidivistic illness into remission. Like, what is this, And I went on to, write a book with an exploding pill on the cover with hundreds of scientific references, calling into question, the foundations of the pharmaceutical medical practice that I had been subscribed to, and then devoted my practice to, so I did a total pivot, devoted my practice to de-prescribing. So to taking women off of all manner of medications. That became my specialty, to your wait list, in Manhattan.
And so this
years.
becomes essentially the beginning of the pivot is not a pivot into nutrition. It's a pivot into helping you to getting off of meds.
Yeah.
And hopefully also with some nutritional support.
Well, what I found was, so I had this zeal, right?
Did you start codifying this? How does this actually, what does this translate to?
I first focused, as you're suggesting, on the de-prescribing, but I never learned how to do that in school. They don't teach you that, obviously. So I started to support women in slowly coming off medication, and I was running like an outpatient medical practice, like hemorrhages, intractable insomnia, like weird skin lesions. I'm a psychiatrist, remember, right? So I'm seeing all of these medical, stigmata emerging in my patients. I had no idea what was going on until I started to tap into the growing community. This was back in like 2010, that was talking about discontinuation syndrome, the withdrawal phenomena associated with psych meds that you come off of, especially if you've been on them for a while, and how medically destabilizing it can be. So then I thought, okay, maybe I need to fortify the resilience of these women before I start to taper the meds. So that was when I drew on my own experience.
You start building a methodology.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so before I would even touch the medication, or if they came to me smoking cigarettes, whatever, I would just say, don't change a thing, but you're going to do this lifestyle protocol, essentially a little more elaborate version of what I did first. And you're going to do it for 1 month, and then your body will have achieved some degree of homeostasis.
Yeah.
And then we'll start that process. And that's when I started to have real success.
Yeah. I love understanding the evolutions, not only of our why, but then also of our methodology. Essentially, we start testing and figuring out how exactly to productize this without even, I think, cognitively being aware of the fact that we're productizing something. I came across many moments while you were speaking where I remember those moments. I remember being angry, and I remember going, I'm going to do something about this because it's not cool in my particular understanding. And then I remember starting to think, well, how do I teach myself to get through this? And then I got through it. And then I remember taking it and going, all right, how can I actually help somebody else go through this?
Yeah.
And this is when you start to essentially frameworkize or productize. And those are not, of course, real words, but they are useful for today's nomenclature. By the way, shout out to recidivism and stigmata. Well done. Nice Fraserian drops right there. Okay. So do you remember when you designed essentially out of this a first flagship program and how this begins to take off?
Yeah, I remember very well. It was quite a manic time in my life because it was also in my personal romantic life, like wild catalytic, that's like a whole, reality show in and of itself. So that was sort of the backdrop to this like massive expansion that I was having. And I'm sure you can relate and people listening can relate to these moments of creative flow where it's like, the book came out of me, this program called Vital Mind Reset came out of me. And it's like, I kind of remember it happened. I did not sit down and say, I'm going to create a program now. Right.
Yeah.
An important ingredient is that I met my mentor, who's named Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez. And I met him in 2014. And I had the opportunity to work with him for the last year of his life.
Oh.
And he was like a Christ-like figure, not only for me, but for hundreds and hundreds of his patients. And he's most well known for his work in the terminal cancer world, but also he addressed many other chronic and neurodegenerative, illnesses. And his protocol was primarily nutrition based and also founded on an understanding of the autonomic nervous system that distributed patients across 12 different diets. So he was like the magical, like sprinkled this fairy dust on my understanding of how to stabilize the nervous systems of these women before I was about to destabilize them, discontinuing their medications. Sure. So it's almost like he, like approved of and affirmed, but then amplified with this kind of energy, my protocol, which is quite basic. It's a specific diet that he helped me understand why this specific diet was essential for the types of women and myself who were in this kind of situation. I, added this medical meditation. So it's like a contemplative practice, 3 minutes a day.
Love it.
But then he allowed me to work with his specific detox protocol, which now is like quite notorious, which is the coffee enema, but is his way of doing it, which he had never shared publicly. And he gave me permission to put as a part of this program. And it's, that's all well and good, except there was something, this man has outcomes that have never been matched in modern medicine. And many of them were posthumously published, like 125 cases of long-term outcomes in the terminal cancer world. I'm talking like stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 34-year survival. In conventional medicine, you'll never see that.
Unbelievable.
And so there was something in his faith, and he used to say like fear can be transmitted, but faith is intrinsic. And there was something in it that he offered to the realm that I then went on to practice in, because I started to have these unprecedented medical outcomes out of my practice. For example, a woman coming to me who was considering doing radioablative therapy for her thyroid because she had a Graves' disease diagnosis. And that we put this diagnosis into remission in the space of months without radiation, without surgery, without medication. And we published this case, as far as I know, was the first one ever to enter into the medical literature of a lifestyle-based approach to the resolution of Graves' disease. But who am I talking about these diagnoses as a psychiatrist? I started to understand when you set the conditions for healing to occur, it just occurs. Okay. But these conditions require that you get on your own team, that you no longer triangulate against your body, against yourself, against your symptoms in the form of rejecting what's actually happening. So you have to find meaning in what's happening. You have to understand
Acceptance,
this as a radically fascinating part of your journey. And get excited about what's coming and know that whatever birth canal you're moving through, however tight it might feel, there's a gorgeous baby on the other end, right?
Yeah.
So that reframe is something that he transmitted to me.
Yeah, the faith, the trust. You're saying two things that I really just want to reflect for a second so the listener can sit with it. Number one, mentors are everything.
Yeah.
They are not mirrors, they open doors.
Yes,
They open
100%.
doors. And then the second thing that I really love is that the birthing then becomes quite I hate the word magical, but magical. You said the book just came out of me. I felt every second of what you said, which is I don't actually remember that happening because when I wrote my flagship program, Live with Enthusiasm, it's like a fever dream.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't remember it happening. I just remembering it happening fast.
Yes.
And it is to this day, 8 years into my practice, my flagship program. Sometimes the door opens and you
Totally.
just go. And that's really wonderful. And then the fact that you start to practice, you start to refine the method, you start to also see results, which actually allows you to begin a feedback loop,
Yes,
starts to move the engine.
totally. Yeah. And just
I love it.
channeling that much energy through your body is
I love
a
it.
feat in and of itself, but it does often like crystallize in this stamp
Yeah.
of your contribution.
Of course, especially when someone is reinforcing the why and just also doubling down on the faith. So then we start to get a foothold. How do the tentacles begin? The podcast, other visibility angles,
Yeah.
the machine.
Well, when I started to specialize in de-prescribing, I developed this massive, like I mentioned, wait list. I mean, it was like 2 years to get in to see me, and my fees were Manhattan fees, okay, private pay.
I'm very comfortable with high fees.
Yeah, I mean, in psychiatry in Manhattan, it's fairly common, even when you're not in a niche, subspecialty. But there were just so few people offering this opportunity to women. I mean, I had an all women practice, to women who were multiply medicated with very limited gains, with side effects,
Yeah.
with, sort of like the end of the road. I mean, like a typical patient, I ended up publishing her case. She was on 4 medications. She had, been multiply hospitalized, had attempted suicide, was having like premenstrual psychotic symptoms. She was headed to a state hospital and she came with her husband. I was like the last stop, right? So that was pretty typical, like quite severe cases. And so I don't know, it became almost like a sport for me to prove, because remember, I was in this defiant energy towards the system.
Sure.
So I thought, well, how do I stick it back to the system? I'm going to publish these cases. So I recruited a team of volunteers, clinical and research-based volunteers. We did an IRB approved trial. We published case series. We published many case reports of extraordinary outcomes, dogma-defying outcomes. And this was my energy for a long time, right? For probably 10 years, where I was really angry, really righteous, and using science to channel that. And
which is still a defiant position. It's important to say because you were obviously still in proving mode.
100%. And it wouldn't be until my actual personal life started to, provide me more and more opportunities for humility and, perspective shifts that I would recognize the immaturity of that posture. Right. And start to see that there was a kind of, it's called like a mixed psychology, right? Like there's a holding the tension of opposites. There's a neutrality. There's a sense of, I don't know, like, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Just acceptance.
Maybe medication is this, maybe it's not. Maybe I know better. Maybe I don't. That kind of softening that started to happen. And it had a lot to do with the end of my last marriage, where I, spent the better part of 4 subsequent years really just going inward, and looking at the victim consciousness that I saw in all of the women that I worked with who had once identified as sick. I saw in the relational patterns that I observed in women who were unhappily married, who were overwhelmed, bitter, burnt out moms, and who were entrepreneurs enjoying the fruits of feminism, at the top of their game, at the pinnacle of the summit, earning 7 figures, all these things, and feeling a hollowness to their
Yes, they're
life,
empty.
like feeling a bereft quality. And I saw these patterns in my own life, in the women that I worked with, in my friends and colleagues, of a kind of disconnection from like a vital force, right? Like something
Yes.
more meaningful. And like you said, a kind of proving, a striving, and importantly, a blaming. Which
means that even though this is so important, I wrote a book called Gilded. It's literally about the gilded cage. It's resistant, but it's not yet free.
Yes.
And you were finally realizing that you were seeking freedom. Thank you for sharing this vulnerable, big opening.
I would say even more than freedom, safety. I started to recognize that I was contributing to the unsafety that I felt in the world, like as an activist, especially in the 2020 to 2022, era, the unsafety that I felt in my relationships as like an anxiously attached, individual, and the unsafety that probably was still residually in my body, even though I didn't have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Right. This sense of like not feeling comfortable in the stillness, simplicity, ease, spaciousness, peace. I had to really titrate over years into sitting on a couch doing nothing for 10 minutes. So the addiction to all of the stimulus and chaos and drama and, all that arc of, my wild lifescape for a long time really needed a long recovery. And so then I put a lot of that work and a lot of what I saw as being like the parallel to exposing the medical system, which was exposing, a lot of the programming around feminist ideology, into like subsequent book and program.
Yeah.
And I saw, oh, wow, the through line is safety, right? Like, how do you provide safety to your nervous system? How do you provide safety to your relational dynamics? That's my life's work, like I just put it all together.
Yeah.
Now it's together as a system called the Relaxed Woman System, because I've come to recognize that a woman who's relaxed in her body, in her energy, channels what she's here to offer, right? Mm-hmm. Her creativity, her vision, her specific contribution. And the commodifying of this was actually quite easy, because I had already, because my practice wait was so long, I had already translated things into the digital world. In 2016. So, when a lot of folks came into the digital product world in 2020, I already
You
was
were ahead of the
there.
game.
Yeah, I guess I was already there.
I love this. I also really love to, again, see just a teacher taking people on the same journey as they're going on. So as you unlock the next level, they can come into the next level. You codify the next level for them. And then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And it becomes an ongoing frequency exchange.
It's the easiest way to integrate. It's funny, I have a teenage daughter.
Yes.
Yeah, my daughter is a junior. And I'm actually quite anti-establishment in many ways, especially when it comes to education. So I actually don't want her to go to college and would rather she not even be in school, period. But she is, and she's a straight A student, and she's studying for the SATs and whatever.
That rebel.
I know, exactly. It's funny, right? Reverse psychology is real. Anyway, so she comes home the other day. I was like, oh, where were you? She's like, oh, I was tutoring my friend for the SATs, though she hasn't even taken them yet.
Little angel.
So she's tutoring her friend because she realizes that that's actually the best way in English. The best way for her to prepare for the SATs is to teach her friend.
It's absolutely true. The didactic practice is what is fundamentally groundbreaking. And that's why I always say the best teachers are really good students.
Yeah.
Because technically we're just nerds who are practicing on you.
Right, exactly.
I love that. I just love that. And so there's also a big helping hand from the universe in the form of visibility. You've been lucky enough to be featured with Goop and with Rogan and other very big powerhouse names. How does that factor into the story of the takeoff?
So around the time that my first book, A Mind of Your Own, came out where I was in this very kind of almost like a zealotry energy. A colleague of mine put me in touch with Joe Rogan. I had never even seen an episode.
I have yet to.
Okay. So
But I do know about the mothership.
there you go, more importantly. And yeah, I ended up there again. It's just one of these, it's like we have as I know, like we have this illusion that we're making something happen, like we're efforting towards it, we're orchestrating it. But the truth is, if you peel off that layer of doingness, like it's like birth, right? Like it was just happening. You didn't birth the baby. The baby came through you, right? So it was really one of those things like it just occurred. And it was career changing for me, and particularly because I hadn't ever, on a personal level, it was sort of the beginning of ending the war with men, as I like to call it, that I didn't even know was starting at that juncture, because I had, again, remember, I was like a lifelong feminist, serving women. My practice was only for women. And here I am on this podcast with this guy who has primarily male like subscribership. So we were flooded, inundated with messages from men who started reading my book, which is literally for women. And it opened me up to an experience of like humanizing men.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm married, by the way, at the time, right? So like, you might wonder, like, how was I harboring all of this resentment and bitterness? And I would argue this is quite common for many women to have this kind of like edgy competitive chip on their shoulder when it comes to men of the world and the so-called patriarchy and all of this.
They have perhaps also family dynamics that have contributed
that have led
this.
to that. Exactly.
We have to have deep compassion.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of a kind of softening and ultimately, what Jung would call like the integration of the negative animus, like this ownership over all of the qualities that I had otherwise projected on the man generally. And then certain men, specifically my partners, for example, father, brother, I mean, you name it. And coming to understand the power that we have as women, particularly in the marital realm, to claim the experience of marriage that most of us want, or we wouldn't have bothered, of a man who is a leader, who is trustworthy, who is respectable, and the power that we have without couples therapy, without big, long processing sessions, to evoke that really out of him through our own shifts in behavior. And that became, it remains like a massive point of focus for me, even a passion. And these days, like, I'll be at a coffee shop or something, and if somebody recognizes me, it's usually because they want to thank me for the role that I've played in their marriage.
Oh.
And it's wild how much more deeply I can receive that than when people have come up to me and said like, oh, I got off my meds because of you. Thank you so much. My sister has her life back. Because it's something in my personal journey that feels redeemed by that kind of service. And it feels, really exciting.
I really understand that. One of the things I was talking about just before you showed up with my wonderful assistant Jezebel is that you attract what you are, not what you want. I've been richly blessed with magnificent relationships, and I believe that with men, especially my husband, Ryan, who is the love of my life, and I believe that it's really a question of evoking from them, but only because you are available to it.
Yes.
And the second thing I really receive is that the deepest resonance you're having is when people thank you for love. The outcome of this work, there's a lot of them. With coaching, you can get healthier, you can get richer. But there's much, much more through love that can be expressed. It's breathtaking. And in that sense, you really are the world. That's a beautiful thing. I want to talk a little tiny bit about the downside of that visibility, though.
Yes.
Because I know what that's like, girl. I know it on a tiny scale, I must tell you. When October 7th happened, you can hear my accent. I am Israeli. I couldn't believe the vitriol from people who had never met me. Visibility comes many times with criticism. And in your case, also because there's medical advice involved. And opinions that, as you just said, might be anti-institutional involved. You may have been the recipient of such criticism. Now, we've talked about this on this program before with Dr. Will Cole, for example. How do you deal with it? And how do you soothe the listener who really wants to go into this realm, but is literally afraid of that?
Yeah. Yes. It's actually one of my favorite things to talk about and offer very practical advice around. So I'll give a bit of context around the fact that so when I healed my Hashimoto's, and I told you, I dove into the literature and I was going to prove how bad mommy medicine and daddy government were, right? And I was going to prove it through the science. So I dedicated myself to that, and I got a good amount of pushback. I mean, my first book was, I guess in this conversation, maybe it's interesting to your readers, I got a 7-figure advance. It was like the lead book for Harper for the spring. And this was arguably an anti-pharma book by an MD. And I said, I'm not sure you've ever published one of these before, but I know that all of these news shows that you think you're going to parade me onto are pharma subsidized. So are you sure this is going to work out? It was totally blacklisted. I didn't get a single interview. My publicist was crying. I mean, it's never, according to their experience, like never happened. I was not surprised. Maybe I was even a little relieved because I didn't want to be in like contentious dynamics.
Yeah. That makes me really sad.
My partner at the time has probably still a huge network, like grassroots, affiliate dudes. And, he was very well connected. And he called on, his colleagues, and he said, my woman's putting out a book and we're going to publicize this. And it ended up being a literal New York Times bestseller, but I've never been mentioned by the New York Times. I mean, there's no review, there's no nothing. I don't even know how that happened. It doesn't even make sense. So that was
neither has Colleen, whatever her name is, the romance novel lady. And that's worked out too. So
yes, I guess it's just,
popularity is popularity, baby.
We just sold the right number, I guess.
Yes,
and
that's
totally
how it happened.
through organic means. And that was my beginning introduction to a combination of being like totally ignored. I was, but then I also was kicked off of 2 faculties. So I lost, not that I cared, of course, at the time, but I, lost teaching privileges at 2 hospitals. I ended up over the years on the disinformation dozen list in 2020, I ended up being a name associated with myths and lies and misinformation around medicine and health, and called reckless and dangerous and all of these things. And I didn't care at all. Literally, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the attention. I've always been kind of provocative type, and it didn't faze me. And probably more than that, it was exciting to me. Now, when I started to explore other arenas after the end of my second marriage, and I started exploring sensuality, sexuality, looking at sort of taboos. I started pole dancing.
Ooh.
I started putting myself out on my Instagram as like a human, not just like a white coated, credentialed, pedigreed intellectual. And that also was something that just, I don't know, I just one day was like, I'm going to post this video.
I love it. And you move into the body.
Crisis.
You also start moving into the body. I don't know if it's classic midlife crisis. I think it's embodiment.
The post-divorce, pole dance is a bit archetypally, sort of renowned. But I then got a lot of pushback. I, at that point, had 250,000 newsletter subscribers. I lost over 100,000.
That's insane. Really?
A newsletter. This is not even social media. And ton of pushback on social media that ranged from you're having a mental break, you are endangering the women that you say you're here to help, stick to talking about, diet and lifestyle. What are you doing? Stay in your lane. Don't you have daughters? Why are you doing this? To all the way to like, you're a bad dancer. Right? So it's like all across the board.
That was really mean.
And and relative to all the other criticism that I had experienced around my intellect, because there's not a part of me that tells me you're stupid, right? Like there's not a part that's holding this
It didn't resonate.
covert belief, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have fertile soil. But the part of me that says, you're womaning wrong. You're embarrassing yourself. You don't know what you're doing. You need somebody to, sort of corral you, is there.
That's the criticism that's painful. Is
And
the
so
one
it landed.
that we subconsciously agree with.
It landed, exactly. And I felt and worked with a lot of shame. And so I started to say, okay, there's something here for me. Because also I was, years into this kind of deeper psychospiritual work. And so I thought, okay, this must be an opportunity. But also I'm really good at like the snap back, right? So I have a really sharp tongue. I can, slice and dice somebody up in one sentence. I don't know. It's a defense I've honed over the years. And I actually think a lot of women have this skill, and many would argue this is how we contend with the biological vulnerability that we experience in this female body, is that we know how to, shame somebody.
Hit the jugular,
Exactly.
as it were. Oh,
Exactly.
well, I'm unfortunately not equipped in that field, but I could learn.
Well, I would count that as actually a step in the right direction.
Pussycat. I'm a gummy bear.
It's a step in the right direction. Many steps, probably. So I decided not to ever respond, right? So I was just like laying that down.
Smart.
And I started doing what I now call, wearing the villain crown, which is quite simple. It just means that I will allow to be possible in the privacy of my own mind what it is that someone is suggesting. Okay. So they're saying I am a reckless narcissist. And for just 30 seconds, 60 seconds, I'll consider that possibility.
Cool.
And
have you read Existential Kink by
Yes.
Carolyn Elliott?
Yes.
That immediately just popped into my head. I was
Yes.
like, one of the things that she says in this wonderful book, which we will link also, is, and I'm so sorry to barge in because it just jumped
oh my
into
gosh,
my
no,
head.
I'm a huge fan of her work. Yeah.
When she says, the reason why so many things that are fucked up happen are because God must like it that way. And that was the moment when I went, yes, I will consider that, because I never considered that option before.
And it feels,
But I'm gonna
she would
sit
say
with that.
arousing, but it feels enlivening, right?
I have yet again, that's part of the experience that I just missed in Existential Kink, but I really found it kinky and funny. Very nice vehicle, but totally. What if you just sat with it for a second and took the sting out? That's when you can really live with things
And
in a
then you
different
get
way.
really good, especially as a coach, as a professional.
Yeah.
You can only help the person in front of you as much as you have owned your shit, as much as you have given yourself permission to be the bad, wrong one. And I spent years doing this practice and getting really good at owning these dimensions of myself that I had very carefully curated out of my own observational field, let alone others. And I decided not to insist on getting anyone to see my perspective any longer, because that's where my shadow was living. It was like, I will get you to see my point. And I could have been a litigator. I mean, for how easily I can argue a case for anything, right? Because remember, I was the conventional doctor, then I became not just the integrative doctor, like the radically, none of my patients will ever touch a pharmaceutical again doctor. Okay. So I can make any case, right? And I'm quite adept at that. And if I was to experience this vulnerable self that I hadn't yet met, it would be because I'm no longer committed to getting anyone to see my perspective. And the place in my life that has served me. So I did this for myself. I was doing it through my work and my business. But the place that it served me the most is as a mother, because as my daughters were entering their like teen years, I was becoming more and more practiced at not being an expert in anything, at not being certain about anything, and at no longer needing to prove my case. And that has totally rebranded the teen years, of mother-daughter dynamics that I experienced, certainly in my own upbringing, where my relationship with my daughters is arguably my greatest achievement.
Full circle, huh?
Yeah.
How nice is that?
Yeah.
And your coaching firm has come a long way as well. How does the operation exist now?
So for a
Because
long,
it's not just you, right?
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I noticed was many.
Yeah. So
people.
for a long time, we ran Vital Mind Reset, which we call VMR. And my lead coach at the time was named Jamie, and we would run big Facebook groups, and, we were running the program all the time throughout the year. I actually got deplatformed off of Facebook in 2019. Literally just woke up one day and me and 30 of my colleagues, our accounts were gone and forevermore, so this is part of this like censorship dynamic and experience it's quite real, but it's also been fine. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's like
Facebook, who cares?
Yeah, it kind of is like that. Like, it's been totally fine. And at that point I was observing, like, what are the outcomes in groups relative to one-on-one, right? Because I come from the one-on-one practice, and I started to see that the group outcomes, like these really wild outcomes that we were having through the program, were not only surpassing the one-on-one outcomes that I experienced in my own practice, professional practice, where people were paying literally orders of magnitude more than they were in the group setting, but it was also much more rapid, the transformation, because it's a 6-week program. So that's when, I decided, even though in any trajectory, especially as women, I'm a double Gemini, I get bored, right? And I kind of was like, okay, I don't want to talk about diet and lifestyle anymore. I want to talk about other things. I want to move. I want to leave. I want to sell this part of my business. I want to just leave this behind me. And it just kept coming back into my field over and over again until I understood through, I don't know if you know Regina Thomashower, Mama Gina. She wrote a...
Oh, yes.
Yes, I was going to say, yeah.
I know Mama Gina.
Okay. So she...
that is one kinky old lady. I love her.
She's a phenomenon. And she's been on my podcast talking about this. None of this is confidential, but she was struggling as an entrepreneur, because she was no longer able to do like big live events, and it was like causing this sort of, I don't know, identity crisis for her as an entrepreneur. And she was at a crossroads in her personal life where she was considering marriage for the first time, in her 60s, and she was struggling with brain fog and anxiety and was really not doing well. Anyway, she reached out to me. She ended up doing this program that I'd only ever really thought of as being for people who were struggling with chronic illness. She's obviously not that picture. She's like teaches feminine embodiment for a living. Okay. Literally. So she's literally, and, and she talks about how it changed her life to take those 6 weeks to get on her body's team, right? To regulate her nervous system through this program. And so then I started to understand, okay, like as women, when it's time to expand in our personal lives through our love, romantic, sexual experiences, as mothers, in our businesses, financially, our relationship to abundance is capped, as many have demonstrated, including Carol and Elliot, is capped by our capacity to hold the next level, right? That's right? So I started to see, like, you can't have those things until your system can capacitate it, because you will collapse, contract. My specialty was always like drumming up drama, right? Like I'd have the windfall, accomplishment, achievement, get the thing, and then I turn right around and have like a new problem I need to focus on.
Upper limit.
Exactly. And I didn't know about Gay Hendricks for many more years.
To Gay Hendricks.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Of course. There it comes to fuck everything up.
And it's real.
It's real.
So she helped me understand that the program has a place in this new avatar that I was mostly focused on, which was, I call it the overachieving, under-receiving woman. And so that helped me to sort of like weave together all of this work that is now offered through, I have 2 lead coaches. But I had certified a number of, 70 or something, 60 or 70 of coaches in the delivery of Vital Mind Reset. The essential credential is that you've had your own experience, obviously, right? Like that's how you train. I don't have a special
it is the most important
way otherwise
thing.
Of training other than that you are no longer afraid of yourself. And specifically in the realm of health and medicine, because I don't know, I think we're still in a time where the spell the hypnotic trance that we are under, thanks to allopathy, has to be broken by an MD. I don't know that a psychologist, an acupuncturist, a chiropractor, having all of the wisdom, knowing all of the things, can break the spell quite the way that me or, my colleague Tom Cowan or Andrew Kaufman, these other MDs who have gone, rogue, can do it. And I just think it's the nature of the psychospiritual crossroads that we're at. And so when you have radically gotten on your own team, you don't see symptoms as a problem. You don't believe in contagion or cancer metastasis. You have a totally new reframe around what is actually happening in your body when something is happening. And your first reflex is no longer fear. To rewire that, it takes a special kind of initiation.
Sure.
And I guess that's what, this work has become.
That's what this work is. That's incredible. And so much under your belt. What's next for you, Kelly?
Well, it's interesting because I've been, I guess, in the entrepreneurial world for 15 years. And as a doctor, we have zero training in business, like literally none at all. I had never had any instruction around how to run a business.
I went to business school and I didn't get any business training. So I'm going to go
That makes you feel a little better.
Just so you know.
That's amazing, right? So I've been, making tons of mistakes, and I've been in the digital product world, in the brick and mortar world. I've written 4 books, I have a podcast, and it's all just sort of like bumbling around in the dark. But one thing that I have observed is that I was in a real, to reference, again, Carolyn's work, I was in a real kink of experiencing disappointment with the people that I was hiring and constantly feeling like I needed to drag them along with me. This was in operations, in marketing, and just feeling like my visionary capacity was not being well supported. And, with vendors, they would overpromise and underdeliver. And I was just, my system was entrained around chronic vigilance in my business. And I kept hiring, especially in the operations role, I kept hiring different women, including friends who remain friends, thankfully, but maybe 8 different women cycled through this position. And I wasn't able to achieve this feeling that I wanted in my business of, I have the idea, the creative inspiration, and it just happens, right? So to be in the feminine pole of the dynamic with my business. And instead, I was in this kind of dysfunctional, familiar, honestly, dynamic. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And I love that you named it, because some people who are listening should hear this. I've often said this. If you're cycling through 8 COOs, with due respect, it's because you like it that way.
And you like it that way.
It's because you like it that
100%.
way. Exactly. And you're getting something out of it. And you really need to understand that you are getting something out of it, because otherwise, I've said what you need to do 7,000 times. You're just not hearing me.
Totally. And I would add, which I'm sure you would agree, that my system, literally my nervous system, had to heal. So I was 4 years out of celibate, okay? Out of relationship, in a space of deep inner work, to get to this place where I could see I'm getting in my own way. I'm micromanaging. I'm not trusting. And I was a very chill boss, right? So it's not like I was obviously micromanaging, but I actually was reflected by one of these women, thankfully, who was able to tell me, listen, Kelly, everybody in your business comes to you to make a decision. You have not empowered them to make decisions independently. And I started to understand that if I'm going to have a leader in the operational role, it's going to be because I actually give that agency to somebody and I can trust that person, right?
Yeah.
So I attracted that leader in January of this year, and my entire life has changed because of it. I can't even describe how different, to the point where I almost entered into almost a kind of depression around my work, where I was oh, do I even want to do this anymore? And it was simply because I was not in the addiction to the vigilance. And I was instead just dispatched, to a totally different state. So I feel, having gone through that now, re-inspired and ignited around what is coming next, because I have this level of structure and support in the business that took me literally 15 years to develop and mature enough to receive. It's wild.
I'm very excited for you. I'm excited to meet you at this point of ignition. I can't wait to see what's next for you. What would you like to invite people to do to check out your work?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I would say probably the most alive space, and that's why it's fun to be on this end of the conversation for me, is in the podcasting world.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. And of all the things I've done in my business, it feels the most creative, interestingly, which I'm sure you can relate to. So yeah, my podcast is called Reclamation Radio, as you mentioned. And it's also been a very censorship-free realm for me,
That's
unlike
awesome.
pretty
I
much
love
any
it.
other
Yes.
platform.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited for you. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing the truth of how things evolve and things, how they come to be, how ideas materialize and turn into missions, and how missions can inform movements. I hope this has inspired you too, dear listener. And if you loved it, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you really, really love it, give us a review. It'll continue to allow us to showcase teachers and teachings that will continue to edify and expand your world. Thanks again for being here today. Stay coached.